Hello and welcome to the Thursday Process. I'm your host, Ian Richardson. I'm joined by my friend Paul Azad. Paul, how you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. For those of you that are cycling in, thank you for joining us. We're going to get started in just 2 minutes. So if you need to grab a glass of water, grab a cup of coffee, etc., go ahead and do that. We'll get started right at 11:32 Eastern, or in 2 minutes. Hello, and thank you again for joining us. For those of you who are cycling in, we're going to get started in just under a minute's time. So if you need to refill that coffee or take care of any other business really quick, now's the time. Thanks for joining us here today. Definitely appreciate you coming in and spending some time. Okay. Looking like it's about to tick over to 2 past the hour. So hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Ian Richardson. I'm your host from Richardson and Richardson Consulting, and welcome to the Thursday Process. This is the webinar series where we dive into process and what drives business and what you can adopt in your business to help you grow and succeed. Today, we're going to be talking about a process for creating company culture. A quick disclaimer before we get started. Presentations on the Thursday Process are intended for educational purposes only. They should not replace independent professional advice or your own personal judgment. Statements of facts and opinions are expressed are those of the participants individually. They don't represent opinion or positions of employers, certifying bodies, or anyone else. Nothing in these webinars should be considered financial or legal advice. You may be watching this on demand. If so, please consider that that the information presented has not been changed, updated, modified since the original presentation. Today is October 27th, and it's 11:33 Eastern Standard Time. So if you're watching this later, that's when this was recorded. It hasn't been updated since that time. A little bit of housekeeping. Everyone's on mute. If you have questions at any time, you can go to the Q&A section and go ahead and post up that question. We will answer your questions either throughout the webinar or at the end. So please go ahead and ask your questions. There are no polls today. So it's end of October. No polls that'll be popping up, so don't worry about those. There is, however, the Creating Company Culture handout. So if you click on the Handouts tab, you can download that. Go ahead and download that process. It's yours to keep. If you're viewing this on demand, you will have to reach out to me to grab that. So you can feel free to reach out to me at connect@r&r.consulting. Happy to send that over to you. So without further ado, let's do some quick introductions and dive in. As mentioned, I'm Ian Richardson. I owned and operated an MSP for about 16 years before selling it at the end of 2021, and I'm one half of Richardson and Richardson Consulting, which is a strategic planning and marketing business development partner, and we function in the MSP space. And today I'm joined by my friend Paul Azad, who is the CEO and founder of ServiceTree. Paul's passion is helping IT partners scale their business and improve their bottom line. His superpower is that he's continually curious. He likes to push those technology boundaries, ask lots of questions, which helps him deliver real IT innovation. While many things have changed and continue to change regarding MSPs in the market, the one thing that stays the same is the need for great people and powerful tools to be successful. He enjoys talking with partners and MSPs across the globe, utilizing his nearly 2 decades of experience in the channel to create and deliver products that help streamline the delivery of managed services. Paul, thanks for taking the time out of the day to join us on the Thursday process.
Thanks for the invite. Very happy to be here.
Oh, it's our pleasure to host you. And so, what are we talking about today? Today we are talking about creating company culture. Culture is one of those interesting silver bullet items, and this is really the habits, values, actions, and behaviors that make up your business, that make things going forward. And so, before we um, before we dive into this, Paul, why don't you talk us through? Because when we were having our conversation to plan this out, you were sharing some stories around your MSP about what was going on at your managed services company that made you say, "Hey, we need to kind of circle back around and look inside and figure out this culture thing." Talk us through that.
So it's really interesting because when we talk about culture, we all want to be involved in a good cultural business and even in our personal life. But when you're in a business, trying to build that culture is not something that you can go to a textbook and sort of read through and understand how to do it. And really, for us, I mean, I've had my MSP for 22 years, and I can definitely say in the beginning I wasn't driven around culture. But as you're trying to build your team and you're trying to get stability and you're trying to have your um, the buy-in of your team, culture is what really is that glue that keeps it together. And it was really interesting because when you think of culture, when I thought of culture, I it was to me it was this sort of it was like magic. How do you build culture? How do you do it? And reality is the culture is around your people. It's around how do you get the best out of your people and how do people work together. And people are the best people in a business. And so for us, what we're trying to do is look at what got our team motivated, right? And so, like if you're going to go and do something that you don't enjoy, you're not going to be really excited, and your passion's not going to show, and your enthusiasm's not going to show. And when your team are coming in and you've got multiple people, that negative feeling or thought is not going to help build culture. So for us, what we try to do is we looked at everything that our team was doing and what are the items that we could remove from their hands from doing, right? So by building that out and trying to find any part of their task, any part of their day that they didn't need to do, and remove it, what we found is our team were enjoying coming to work more. They were enjoying being around the other team members more. And so that was really the slow, but um, in hindsight, it was a slow, but it was definitely the starting point of how we were able to improve our culture and build on it. So, you know, the way I sort of see is culture is it's not the cause, it's the effect. So if you do the other parts of your business well, then you find that the culture automatically, I shouldn't say automatically, but it does start developing, and that really is the nuts and bolts of how we were able to um, build the culture in our team. And I can definitely tell you, it wasn't what we did from a management point. I'll phrase that. What we did in management point build the seeds, and that is what the team sort of took on board, and that's sort of how what we felt the culture started to improve. And then what we found was our team were able to enjoy what they were doing every day, and they were enjoying it and being part of what they were doing. And for us, that's what we saw as culture, and we see that today. I mean, for me today, it's ensuring that my team are doing what they want to do, enjoying, being happy in the place. And, the result of that is a culture that people want to be part of. They've got an avenue to hear what we're saying. We've got an avenue for them to talk openly about what they want to talk to us about. And that open channel and that open dialogue is for us what we found was the nuts and bolts of starting and maintaining good culture in the business.
Yeah, and what one story that or one part of your story that resonates home and bubbles up with me is that enjoyment. If you're not enjoying your job, it shows through, and that hits home. I've said this a couple of times on this series and on others that when I sold my MSP, I like to say that I was about 3 days past my sell by date. So it's just like the jug of milk that you kind of open up. You open it, and you're like, it's starting to have a little like this is a little bit off, and that's because I didn't enjoy managed services anymore. That did start negatively impacting the company culture. Right before the transaction at my MSP, you could see it in the motivation of the team. And now that transaction is completed and I'm no longer there, you can see that that team is now motivated and engaged and performing well and delivering that great service again. So that's such a key takeaway. So if we're thinking about the process, and so if those of you who are following along, if you open up that document, you can absolutely follow along. The first step around in the process that you guys use to develop a company culture is that you selected a methodology, a strategic operating system, a business management system, call it what you will, insert your 3 letter acronym here. You chose a platform on which you are going to standardize. And so there's a lot of them out there. Paul, you and your team used the balanced scorecard or Pathfinder methodology. Other popular ones are Gazelles or EOS or Stratop, which is what Richardson and Richardson use. That's what I'm certified in. Um, Talk to us about figuring out, hey, we need to come up with a structure. There was a couple of things. You went out and you looked around for the structure that worked for you, and then you chose to use a facilitator. Talk to us about those two decisions.
Yeah, and they're really, really critical to it all, to be honest. The first one was, yeah, we went with balanced scorecard. One of my team and with my operations manager was I wouldn't say experienced in it, but had utilized or had been part of that in previous jobs, and he felt that that was a really simple but very powerful structure. But as you said, there are definitely many of them around, and I don't believe any one of them is going to be better or worse than the other one. And unfortunately, or fortunately, this is one of those things that getting the framework or the system is not the answer. It's just going to help you through the process, right? And it's key to understand that this isn't going to happen overnight. Um, for me, I'm very, very driven. I'm somebody that does things at warp speed. And those that know me just constantly, just constantly question why I do as many things at once. And that's just me, right? And in the beginning, when we decided to go with Pathfinder, my first thing was how long is this going to take? And my operation manager said, "Paul, don't waste any more of your time thinking about it, and we're not going to spend any money on doing any of this if that's your attitude." And I got taken back, and I was like, "Why?" He's like, you know, this isn't going to be easy. It's definitely not going to be quick, but the best part about it is the results are going to be really great. And so once we sort of, once I decided that, you know what, this is something that I really want to build on, um, and we decided to go with balanced scorecard, then yeah, the choice was that it was to self do this one or was it to use a facilitator? And in all honesty, for me, that was a no-brainer, right? There's some things that, you like to have someone else fish for you, and there's some things that you want to learn how to fish. Now, going through and having a facilitator facilitate this was actually not being, it was the right thing to do because the process itself is not very hard, but it's the way that that message is going to be delivered to your team. And when you do these systems, like when we had Bond Scorecard, we had, think when I looked at photos, there was about 13 of us in there. We had people from management, we had people on our service desk, we had our technicians that go on the road, we had accounts, we had a bit of everybody, and that was really that was the I suppose the success of you of going down this path, and then that was also the success of what came out of it because the end of it is it wasn't my result. It was more my team than me. I was just another little guinea pig in the process. But at the end of it, what it meant was all the people that were involved in it and everyone that wasn't involved in it but had people from their colleagues in it felt really very driven to make it happen and very driven to utilize what we put together. So it was. Did you want me to go into a bit of how long it took us, or did you want to just? Do you want
Oh,
me sort
that's
of just talk?
it's we'll just chat through it. I mean, one of the big things that you said that resonates with me is the no brainer having that facilitator, and that was my
Mhm.
experience when we implemented StratOp and my old MSP2. Is if you're trying to, you can only do one thing at a time with strategy, and so you're either running the sessions or you're participating in it. And as the CEO and head of the organization, you kind of owe it to yourself, owe it to your company, and owe it to your team to be at the table with them. And then there's something that you said too that's so powerful, that hey, the plan wasn't my plan, it was my team's plan, and I was just a participant. And it's so important, because if your team builds the plan and like, this is the systems, this is the process, these are the values, this is the vision, this is the mission, this is all the stuff, it's your team's plan. But if
Mhm.
you're running the meeting, then it's your team's plan minus you. But if you're there, then your team said, well, yeah, Paul's with us. We're all going forward. It's our plan. And Paul's part of our team, and we're part of Paul's team. And it creates that alignment, which forms that basis of the culture that you're trying to build.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing that when I think back to it is because I was just another one of them at that time going through this process, they didn't feel they didn't feel that I was making any decisions for them. And the facilitator treated me no different to anybody else on that team, right? So the other great thing about that was they sort of saw me as just another one of them. They saw me as somebody that had ideas that weren't going to be decided on. So a lot of times your team sees a manager as the decision maker, and well, it's their way or no way, or they're not going to listen to us. But when we did this all together, like some of my ideas they didn't agree with, and guess what? We didn't go with it, and that was totally fine. And that I think that was the sort of the start of what ended up, and when I say ended up, it was only a 3-day process that we went through, but that was the what ended up being the I suppose the thing that broke the camel's back for the team to get involved. Once they realized really early that I wasn't deciding anything, it was more their decision than mine. They all started to just, ideas came out of nowhere. They really got they really bought into it. And then after that, sort of that 3-day workshop that we did, even going down past that, there was definitely more sessions that we did together, but they all just stayed with it. They just all very much made it their own. And I think that was really a key element for the success of it.
Yeah, and the other thing, so you mentioned 3 days. That's a normative experience for those of you who haven't gone through one of these. When you launch these plans, it almost all of them take 3 days in a room. And it's not
Hmm.
like 3 days, hey, we'll come in for an hour and a half, and then we'll have a break, and we'll come in for an hour and a half. Now you're in there for 8, 9 hours, like
Yeah,
15-minute breaks maybe every couple hours, and a working lunch. You're in it to win it
yeah,
in that
definitely.
room.
And I think what you said is right. You're in it to win it, but it's not. It's a team win, right? And I think once yeah once they sort of like again, when I think back to it, if I knew, and if I think if my whole team knew how much time and energy it took for those 3 days, they might have been a bit more reserved about doing it. But I definitely think that everybody that was part of that, that process, those workshops, nobody wanted to go home early. We were just all doing it together, and we all enjoyed doing it together. And I think, personally, I can honestly say there was a lot that I learned about my team individually in that room. That I didn't, that I, it's not things that that you experience. It's not things that you talk about at, having a coffee. It's not something that you talk about at a Christmas party or get together. It's things that come out when I suppose, when you're all in the same boat trying to, get somewhere together, right? And so it was definitely a powerful couple of days in the workshops.
Yeah. One other question that you hinted at. So after you we'll circle back to that. I'll remember this question. So this will be one that I selfishly put in. And so as you walk through that, one of the key next steps is kind of defining the business. What's your business? What do you value? What do you want your impact to be? Who the business is as an entity can help attract talent. It can resonate with customers. It can make you a desirable partner for vendors. It supports growth efforts through sales and marketing. So there's there's 3 to 4 big pieces in my mind that really go into like, hey, who are we? And that's really the common three are always known: mission, vision, values, and then what's the strategy? Like what sets us apart? In EOS, it's called the three uniques. In Stratop, it's called the big idea or core strategies. But talk about mission, vision, and values, and what you guys did around that, and why it was important as the basis, as that structural foundation for culture.
And it goes back to this whole thing of doing it as a team. So the mission and the vision was not decided then. It was something that we reviewed a few years earlier. Um, Actually, I'll rephrase that. We went through another process to ensure that our mission and vision was clear. But our values, and the interesting was values. So again, the values was defined, but it was brought up really early on the workshop, and it was to talk about to make sure that the team felt that the values were right for what we're doing. And that wasn't changed. Everybody sort of agreed, but what wasn't clear was how the values were being utilized and how the values were being communicated internally and externally. And I think that was sort of one of those starting points as to realizing that, I thought the mission, vision, and values were pretty clear. It was very well, it was easily documented. It wasn't like a paragraph, vision, but or the mission, even the values. But what came out from then was that it wasn't clear, and it wasn't clear that how we were doing each of those things to ensure that our customers felt that what we were doing was within in line with our values. And so together, when we reviewed the values, I think people got to see again the inside or behind the closed door ideas as why these visions were important. Sorry, why the values were important. But again, it was sort of those building points of making sure that the team buy into it. And again, at that point, we opened it up and said, listen, if these are not what we believe in, then we need to stop and reconsider it, because what I think this is really the nuts and bolts of what I see as culture. The team need to sort of see the business as sort of theirs as well. They need to see that they are not just a number, right? And so when we were doing this, and I think from my point of view is I was pretty vulnerable in some of those elements, and letting the team decide some of those things that I always thought was something that only I would decide. It definitely made me very vulnerable, but I think that's also what made it so powerful for the team. That's where the team sort of saw, listen, like Paul's leaving this open to all of us to put. And, at the time I felt really, really nervous because this is my baby. At this point, my business was 13 years old. Um, but I actually pretty much at that point I was like, you know what, I'm going to let my team come and help decide with this. And they did. And they listened to it. I think at the beginnings they were very much on the thoughts that they're going to change some of them, but going through that and talking about why the mission statement was a mission statement and what it meant, and then what the values meant, we definitely collaborated together to, I think, even make it more clear internally what the values were and what we were doing.
Yeah, when you create those collaborative or communal value statements and a communal mission statement, it's not Paul's values or Ian's values or Tom's values or Sally's values, it's our values. And that the same with the plan, the process, everything else is, with this. I'm imagining that your experience mirrored my own. The team takes ownership of it because they built it. Now this is every person in that room is saying this is my plan.
Mhm.
This is my business, not necessarily in terms of ownership, but no, this is my company, and I have pride and take value and take ownership in the performance and in the health of this company because they've been in that room and being part of that room and being part of those values and being part of the exercise. When you get when your team, when your frontline staff's taking ownership of things and they say, "Well, I'm accountable for this. I'm responsible for this." That's secret sauce. That's jet fuel. That's the rocket
It's a
ship right
secret
there.
sauce. It is this definitely, and something that I definitely was on my mind, and I think at this point, people listening to this or watching this would ask the question: does that mean you need to redo this whole thing again when your team change? And the good thing about it is, when your team is built, or when you build these things with your team and these systems and building the culture, your team have got a part of it. So although, people will come and go, as long as you're fortunate enough not to lose a big majority of your team at one time, you'll generally find that those that the grains that you've seeded early on during this will stay around. So as your people come and go, if it's something that the team is bought into and a part of, they're going to be very passionate about it. Right? It's no different to when we look in our houses. As your kids grow up and come and go, your house still feels like your house. It doesn't feel like someone else's house. And your kids will come in and go home back to their own. They still feel they're at home with their parents, and there's a reason for that. It's not because that the kids are still living there, but you know, if you think back to the beginning when the kids are around and they're kids, what you build in your house and what it feels like is something that they do together, right? And so this is no different to that. If you build it with your team, you can, you can add more people into your team. You can, remove people or swap people out as it can be, but your culture stays the same. So you don't have to go back and redo it all. I mean, something that um, bigger organizations definitely review balance scorecard and do sort of a realignment every certain amount of years. But
Mm-hmm.
in an MSP sized organization, I would expect that if it's done and your team are part of it, you're able to get the benefits for a very long time, and it's definitely not a short term thing.
Well, and you scratched right at something too. If you're on the other side of the equation, you did have a massive turn event. Nothing prevents you from starting the process over. That's the great thing about a process is, hey, you know what? We've had enough turn, or maybe we lost some key leaders or key advocates. Redo it. Redo the exercise. Redo the process. Nothing says that it's a one-way door. Or you can only do the experience once. It's not like hopping on a rocket ship to the moon. Like just find another 3 days and restart your process.
Correct. And I think you sort of just touched on it then. It's yours though, right? It's not these things are not something you can buy, right? Even if it's not a textbook, you can't bring somebody in there and tell them to do this for you and walk away. And unfortunately, this is not a silver bullet that you can pay somebody to just do it. Everybody, well, not everybody, the owners, the management team, and you ideally want people from your team to be in this process, and that's where that's where the gel is to keep it going.
Yep. And so once you have that vision defined, you have your values defined or understood by all, you have your mission defined or understood by all. You really want to start creating some areas of focus. And so the next part of the process you and your team did was you took that vision, hey, here's where we are, here's where we're going, and you broke it into some focus segments. And then you said, hey, look, these are the 2, 3, 5 things that we're going to work on. Here they are, and in terms of importance, this is the most important, and maybe these two are kind of equal importance, and then there's these bottom three. And you created some action plans. You said that this is what we're going to do, And we're not going to build Rome in a day. We're not going to go from zero to hero, or 1 to 100. Here's how we go from 1 to 2, and here's how we go from 2 to 4. Here's the incremental steps that we're going to do on each of these focus segments. So you chose what you were going to work on, and you built a plan about it. Oh, it looks like we might have just had Paul have a drop off. So I'll keep talking, and when he comes back in, he'll come back in. So when you think about breaking up into focus segments, choose what's important right now. So if you think about your values, what's going to reinforce the values, what's going to help you along on your mission, what's going to drive you closer towards your vision being that spot in the sand 2, 3, 5 years in the future. Well, how are you going to get from where you're at today to where you want to be in those 3 years? What's the most impactful? What's the least impactful? Work on the most important first, and then you can pull in the least important as it is. As with anything with strategy, nothing's written in stone. So if something's the most important right now, and then a year down the road, 6 months down the road, 2 years down the road, you say, hey, this isn't really the most important thing anymore, reorder your areas of focus and start working on them in a different order. Looking at the document, creating some measurables and improvement tactics are solid. So this is kind of that cadence that you want to get into, which we will dive into a little bit further on in the session. But making sure that you have measurables around your improvement tactics, that activities, actions, milestones. You really want to make sure that with each part of your focus in your vision, you've created a SMART goal. And in case someone's not familiar with that acronym, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. Each one's equally important. So having that specificity and the measurables that will let you know, hey, are we making progress towards those objectives and goals is important. Hey, Paul, welcome back.
Sorry, guys. Just yeah, Reddit decided that it wanted to do a reboot. I'm guessing because all of a sudden I lost everything. Sorry, guys.
That's all
Um,
right. Nobody's immune to internet interruptions. So I pinch hit in that and was talking about, hey, breaking up the vision statement into core focus, organize that importance and action statements to support it. But how did you guys choose what was most important versus what was least important? Talk to us about that.
we it was broken. Well, the good thing is that the process in this case, balance scorecard, has the high level areas that you should be doing. But and in all honesty, this is where the facilitator makes the day. Um, with the facilitator, they I suppose they steered the conversation into what kind of things we chose for each of the areas. But again, it was back to the team. Um, reality is that the organization has to be profitable for the organization to be around. But that is more an effect, not a cause. That's an end result. So we started down the bottom where, what it is about our team, what is important about our team. And a lot of that was around, their day-to-day things. It was regarding what was important to them in how they did their day. So it was when I go back to how did we choose? It was the facilitators. I suppose their role in this whole process into um, getting the information out from our team. And then we just went with what the team thought was important, and then we just started to build on them. And just before the internet dropped, I heard you mention that it got broken up into pieces, and that's really it. The 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 first or the workshops is your starting point, but from that point you definitely do break it down to a lot of little pieces that you can build on from day one, but you keep building on throughout the process.
Yeah. And so, skipping ahead in the document, one of the incredibly interesting parts where we were talking about is you mentioned creating a story. around the strategy for the organization, creating that story, and then using that story to assist in communicating. In managed services and in a lot of industries, it's pretty tough to shut down for 3 days. And you might not have 100% of your team in the room with you. You'll have representatives, but not everyone can sit in the room for 3 days and make that plan. You still have to operate the business, you still have to run the ship. And
Mhm.
so, talk to us about that concept of crafting a story and using that story to aid in communication of the plan to the team.
Um, so yeah, back to what you mentioned, we definitely didn't have our whole team in it, but it was important for us to have people from all the areas of the team, and when they were there and they were communicated to, and that's where, going back to what we said, is if it's part of, if the team buy into it, then it sticks around. Um, and the story, I suppose, the story again was something that came out of. The effect of the story was what we took away. But for me, the story was how I wanted our customers to feel, how I wanted our team to feel. And um, for me, what I always say is it's not a win, it's not a win-win, it's got to be win-win-win, right? And this is really where I recall, this is where it all started for me, around this the win-win-win that I talk about. If your team aren't winning, if your team aren't enjoying what they're doing, then they're not able to a deliver nicely or deliver in the best way they can to your customers. So if your team don't win, then nobody wins. Then the second one, that's the win, is your customers. Your customers have to feel like they are winning in the relationship. And so for them, it's they have to win. And we're not talking about pricing. We're not talking about, even for your team, we're not talking about how much they get paid per hour or their benefits. What we're talking about is, as a person, in them enjoying what they're doing. They've got to win out of it. So your team is winning and your customers winning. And again, back to your customers, it's not about being the cheapest. It's not about, bending over backwards and doing unreasonable things. It's got to be win-win. You've got to win financially, but they've got to win and know that you're there for them wherever, whatever they need you. But they can't be pulling you down. They can't be being unrealistic and have demands. But the third part is, when those two parts of it, the win-win-win happen, the third part is the organization. And that, as a business owner, that's including you. So once again, going back to this, this all coming out of what happened in with the facilitator, that's sort of where it all came out. And that's a story that I actually talk about internally and externally, to customers, to prospects, to even new employees or people that I interview. I always talk about the win-win or the win-win-win. And, people talk about the win-lose. Reality is, there's no such thing as a win-lose. There's a win-win or a win-win-win, or there's a lose. Because if
Yep.
any part of the win is not a win, it's a lose, and it's you've missed it, or they've missed it. And until you can sort of get it back to a win-win, there's no real point in the relationship or the partnership. And again, when we talk about this, when I talk about this to my team, you know, it's always about the win-win, because if they're not winning and I'm not winning, then it's just it's not something that we should be part of. And that is definitely the story that I talk about consistently, yeah, internally or externally.
Yeah, yeah. If you're able to, that adage of take care of your team and your team will take care of your customers, and your customers will then end up taking care of you.
Yeah.
So having that focus on making sure the team's got that enjoyable space, a good culture, the ability to celebrate. And I love that you mentioned that it's not around necessarily financial compensation. Simon Sinek, who I'm a big fan of, always talks about that concept of get someone to safety. The finances and the benefits and all those tangible exchange for employment, that's the safety metric. That's the, hey, I can pay my bills, I can achieve my goals, I'll be able to retire on time or whatever. That just makes someone safe. It's the other parts, the coaching, the enablement, the almost the partnership between employer and employee, that makes someone happy. It's them seeing that they're making a difference and feeling valued. And and being appreciated and all of those extra intangibles that gets them to then, hey, I'm happy and engaged. And when they're happy and engaged, customer service is easy. Doesn't matter that your customer is calling because their system's down. Like, hey, I hear you. I understand the impact. We'll get you back up. And that makes
Mm.
the customer happy and feel heard. When your customers are happy and feel heard, they're always happy to pay that bill. And when they pay that bill, that's what makes us happy.
Definitely.
So, talk to us when we think about management of culture. Culture and process, any part of a business requires management, and culture requires a special type of management. And really, that's through we talked about a couple of different meeting structures. And there's the concept of a leadership meeting, and then the all company meeting or the all staff meeting. And so, talk to us through that. An all staff meeting, readily apparent. It's a meeting that everybody gets to be in. But what about the leadership meeting? Talk to us about the importance of that and how you took things out of leadership and made it so that everyone, if someone wasn't in the room, again, they feel like, well, that's the right meeting. They're not hiding things from me. They're managing the plan for me.
Um, because during the process, it was very, it was made very clear to everybody that although they might not own the company, their 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 point of view or their part of the business is very important. Um, it was it was made very clear to them that there's going to be elements of what we do behind the scenes that are not public, and there's, like everything in life, there's going to be elements that are not. But what we definitely did make was as much of it as public as possible to the team and communicated it. And so from their point of view, what we said and what we did was being very transparent about things that were were decided in those meetings. And um, even when things, this was we did this about 10 years ago. And so during the 10 years, we definitely had some downtimes as well as, uptime. So there's definitely times that there's parts of conversations or there's conversations that are had behind closed doors that are difficult. But what we did is that we still communicated parts of that. So there was enough information for the team to know that we weren't, that we're doing things in our best interest as well as theirs. And so I think from their point of view, even though there is meetings that not everybody's part of, it was very important to them that we communicated back to them what was at those meetings and how it could impact them, in either direction. And in all honesty, it's not easy to do that, but again, it definitely makes the people involved. It definitely makes the team feel more more part of it, right? Like in everything we're trying to do is, even when we did this 10 years ago, having and finding good team and finding good resources, finding good people that fit in your team was not easy. And unfortunately, in today's world, it's a lot harder. So we don't always want to do things just because we're going to pay them more, it's going to cost us less. Um, and back to what you just said about Simon, I totally agree that, uh, as he said, it is a biggest demotivator is how much they're going to get paid or how much that you're willing to pay them. And it's all the other things that definitely help. And for us, again, it was communicating things that were, even strategic conversations that we had, so they could at least feel part of it, and they could, again, remind us, does this match our vision mission? Does this match our values? And reality is sometimes I'd been definitely pulled up by my team because I'd said something or I had a thought that didn't match them. And, I definitely took it on the chin and go, yep, you're right. That does not match it. And, I reevaluated and changed what I was thinking about doing, or changed why we are going to do something because of those, those key elements.
I love the use of mission, vision, values as a filter. At my old MSP Doberman, we built out a decision making tool, for lack of a better term, that said, look, this is the mission statement, this is the vision, this is where we're headed in a very compressed form. here are our values, here's what they mean. And then we built out on the second page after that summer, we built out a series of questions that everyone could ask about any situation, big or small. And it became a decision making tool set. Hey, you're on the phone, you're on the spot, you're on the wire, you don't have a chance to touch base with a team member, you got to make a decision. Run it through these filtering questions, and we designed it in a way that if every answer was yes, it's a correct decision. Might not be the decision that someone else would come to, doesn't matter. If it's in
Mm.
alignment with the values, if it honors the mission statement, and if it's something that moves us towards our vision, it's the right thing to do. And no one ever gets in trouble for running through that filtering thing and say, hey, here's how I came up with yes. And if you came up with an incorrect yes, well, that's not your fault either. That means we need to train better on mission, vision, and values. We did a bad job at imparting those, or training to those, or reinforcing those. So, again, as long as someone followed that process, it just wasn't problems. And we found the other thing that I found when we did that is that when people started making value based choices and doing mission and vision based choices, the company started to perform faster. We were already performing better, but once everyone was empowered to do that, we started resolution times went down, sales closed quicker, projects closed quicker. Everything started moving faster because people felt empowered to say, "Hey, you know what? This is going to go off the rails. I'm going to call this customer. I'm just going to take ownership." And that empowerment and ownership was, again, it's jet fuel.
Yeah, I think you said it earlier. It's the secret sauce. It's getting people to buy into it. And we always talk about, the buy-in, and I prefer the buy-in rather than, the what is it in for me. Because the buy-in is more, it's more a win-win, right? Where if you think about what's in it for me, it's more about one person generally getting a benefit that they might not have got elsewhere. And yeah, like as you mentioned, putting something in place that your team can make decisions, it definitely makes them feel good. And it makes them feel good. That's culture. That is exactly what we're talking about, right? It's these little things that give the business the culture that ideally most of us want to work in.
So in terms of feedback, how did you solicit feedback and kind of measure, hey, how are we doing on our values? How are we doing on things? How did you get feedback from your team around it so that you could, because culture is one of those things. It's not like response time, right? Response time's math. You can just plug in the numbers and this is your average response time. Culture is very amorphous and intangible, so it can be difficult to measure without a bit of process around it.
The the operations manager that um, I suppose suggested we do this is his idea, or his whole thing is about people, right? So he always had the channel open for everything, but culture was one that it's that gray thing that you don't know how to touch, you don't know how to describe. Um, but the feedback we actually got was the other way. The people that we saw the benefit of doing all this. The team were happier. You could just tell. It's sort of hard to describe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, it's easier to tell you what makes you sad than what makes you happy, right? Because making you sad is something that's normally a pain point, but making you happy, sometimes you're just smiling and you're just like, why am I happy? And I think that's what we sort of saw was, and what I noticed more was, um, it wasn't actually not that people were coming to work unhappy, but it was just that, um, it's just that they not even took more energy or effort. You could just see that the decisions they were making and even the conversations they were having with the customers felt more close to home. It felt more natural. It felt more um, authentic. I think that's it. It was their what they were saying to us internally, and the conversations I think were more authentic. So, and I think it was all around this. being an open door, an open book, having them being part of this journey. Even the ones that weren't in there, they were happier to communicate back to us what was not working, what was working, because they saw throughout the process of the workshops that, we're being very transparent, we're being very vulnerable and letting them see things and hear parts of the business that they weren't, they, I suppose, wouldn't have expected to see. And so having that sort of that door open, I think was really what started it.
Yeah, yeah. That ability to that ability to have that open door and to the vulnerability as a tactic. If I found every time that I get out of my own way and just like let people see how I feel and what I'm worried about and what brings joy and what the focus is and all of that, it creates that alignment and it moves things forward. And so, being close to the bottom of the hour, Paul, I want to shift gears a little bit. You've got your MSP and you also have Service Tree. And take a couple of minutes and introduce us to what Service Tree does. And one of the questions that I'd love to have a quick answer on is how Service Tree can help out other MSPs that might be tuning into the Thursday process and help their culture out. So,
Okay. So it's interesting. Service tree was not something I thought of doing, right? Service tree was actually a result of doing this, going through this process. And most people don't realize that, but going through this process and going through this, and remember what I mentioned, um, if the team are enjoying what they're doing, they're going to do it well. And something that they didn't enjoy doing, and something that we struggled with, and in honestly, most MSPs, if not all, struggle, is ticket allocation. So people use dispatchers, other people have, just expect their team to do it. But as a business owner, I can see 10 tickets and go, that should be done first, that one second, that one third. And there's some thoughtness in there. It's not oldest and newest always. It's not, most important customer or not. There's all this other thing. And that what we found out was a pain point because the team hated being told off for not looking after the right ticket. And as I said, I don't always work oldest and newest because there's going to be some newer tickets that are more important. And so we built Service Tree. It allocates tickets, a ticket dispatching system, and it works directly with ConnectWise. And when the your technician clicks on Open Next, it goes through and finds the next ticket they should work on now based on an algorithm that we worked on. And that algorithm was about 18 months in the making. And it's the secret sauce of Service Tree. So back, and I can say that this is how powerful this whole process was for us, that we actually spun off a whole product, being Service Tree, because of what we found out about our team, that they didn't like dispatching tickets. They didn't like being responsible for not doing the correct ticket at the right time. And yeah, so that's what Service Tree does. It's really simple. It's a plug into Chrome. They click on Open Next and it gives them the next ticket. So it removes the whole headache of the technician picking the wrong ticket. It
mm,
automatically sets the ticket status and away you go.
yeah, it grabs that displeasurable action of, oh God, there's two really important things, or there's nothing burning right now. All of these things seem important. What do I need to work on next? Removing that need to decide. Hey, I
Yeah,
click the button, I work this. I click the button, I work this. It's not my decision. I click the button, I work next, and then not even having to schedule manage on your reactive desk. I gotta like it, not only the choosing, but removing of that need for scheduling has to just be a weight off the shoulders.
yeah, it definitely simplifies that. And back to what we talked about, there's things that your team and people want to decide and not have to be asked what to do. Which ticket to work on is definitely not one of them. Yeah, that's not something that any of us really care to do. But once we do, when we get a ticket, we want to care about that ticket, and we want to be caring about what the customer, what we deliver to that customer at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. And so, if they want to learn more about Service Tree, they can go to service-tree.com. They could sign up. They could reach out to you. Paul's active on LinkedIn too. You could reach out there. Or if you want a personal introduction, just ping me. Everyone on this webinar probably knows who I am. Ping me, and I will absolutely connect you with Paul. Um, and so one of the questions that I had, and as a quick reminder to everyone, if you haven't grabbed that handout, click on the handouts tab, download the process. It goes step by step through everything that Paul and I have been talking about. But one of the questions I had, and I want to rewind us back to the beginning, it took 3 days in the room, and I know how long this took me, and I'm curious to see if my fearless prediction is it's probably about the same. Took 3 days in the room. You break for a bit, maybe you have some little sub meetings about like, okay, what's the plan we're gonna do, and all of that. But once you're done with creating the plan, you're kind of going into, I call it habit forming. You're building the habits around this stuff we've just built, around values and around the mission and around the strategies and around everything else that we're going to do. You're kind of it's just like going to the gym and learning how to work out, or if you the typical example of like a kid learning to tie their shoe. At first you really got to focus on it, and then eventually you just, hey, I tied my shoe and I didn't even think about it. It's all muscle memory. How
Mm-hmm.
long did it take you and your team to go from, hey, I really have to think about tying my shoe, to bang on, I'm tying my shoe, I'm out the door? What was that time
Uh,
frame for you guys?
I think different parts of it became at different points. Some of it was really, really quick, and some of it definitely took a lot longer. So the parts that were really, really quick were around the delivering of the customer, what we expected to deliver to the customer. That was, I definitely would say, we saw changes within a couple of months. But then there was other ones that were things that we didn't do very often, and they were definitely closer to, between 1 and 2 years. But it's not something that, it's not like watching a house being built where you've got to wait to the end before you can open the door and walk in. The benefits of these are very, very early. Like the reason why some of these benefits came up so, in the first few months was because everybody was part of it, right? And I just don't know how, I think I'm repeating myself, but having everybody part of it and being part of the process, and it having facilitated it by somebody that knows what they're doing was so powerful that it just started to build. It's sort of one of those things that it's just self-building, and so if you're sort of thinking about that, I'd say it could be in the first few months. Some of them will come through, and then some of the ones that are not common will definitely could take you 12, 18 months.
Yeah, when everyone's aligned in it, you don't have to convince anyone, hey,
Yeah,
we're going to do it this way
correct.
now. It's like, no, hey, we all chose we're going to do it this way now. Let's start doing it.
Yeah, definitely. And the ones that took longer were not because it's the ones that things that we didn't do often, right? It wasn't because it was back to muscle memory. You got to do it a few times, and some of those things that we didn't do often, definitely the cycles of them were a couple of months between each time, and that's why it happened.
Yeah, that was at Doberman. Our experience was similar, and you hit it bang on. It took between 1 and 2 years. It was right around that 18-month mark when I started coming in and going, huh, this doesn't like, oh, this happened, we need to do this, or oh, it's time to do this. It was kind of like hitting on that cadence where you're walking through the door and everything seems to be running smooth. The other piece, and I'll call him out, Israel Lang, who was my HTG facilitator and implemented StratOp at Doberman for us. When he came in, he drew a little picture, and it was, like, here's your launch, here's your adoption phase, and here's where you really start to see the benefits after you get your habits all formed. And during adoption, it's 18 to 24 months. And he said, like, look, this is a straight line. Here's what it really looks like. And he did this
Yeah,
crazy roller coaster that would make anyone throw up, and drew in a little bit of a whale there, like on the
yeah,
line, and then said, and then you're optimizing. And that picture stayed up on our wall for 6 years, because I said, like, look, no matter what we're doing, remember that after you build your plan, you've got to implement it. And implementation doesn't look like this. We got to go chase that whale.
yeah. We actually we had a whiteboard that we used through the 3 days, and it was there with all people's handwriting for about 6 years as well. It's funny you say that. It was actually 6.5 odd years, we still had it there. So yeah, it's definitely something that goes up and down. So yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah. And so we're right about 40 seconds out. And for those of you who are watching, if you have any other questions, anything like that, just reach out, ping them over to me. I'll make sure to get you an answer from Paul. But Paul, kind of final word on culture, 30 seconds. Take us home.
It's something that's great. It's something that doesn't happen overnight, but when you go through and you build culture, it's something that's very warm and fuzzy. Make sure your team are part of it, and it's the secret. It really is the secret sauce that you'll once you have it in place, you'll definitely feel the secret sauce that you're missing at the moment.
Well, thanks again, Paul. I super appreciate you coming on and
You're
sharing
welcome.
some knowledge about Thursday
Thank you.
process. And
Thanks
to
for having
everyone
me.
who's here, have a great day.
Take care, everybody. Cheers.